Hello, people. It's December 15th. It's 2010. This is Day 9 Daily number 229. 230th show is going to be tomorrow, and then I'm done. I'm going to Phoenix to do the EG Masters Cup, and then I'm going straight to Michigan is where I'm going. Yes, and then I'm going back home to Kansas City, and everything's going to be great, but nothing is great today. I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Everything was terrible. Ugh. Can't even... Nothing actually bad happened, but I guess the coffee wasn't functioning properly today. That's fine, though. That's okay, because today has some very special things coming up for you. First of all, we're doing the daily. That's the first good news of the day. This daily is going to be focused on an absolutely insane game, like a crazy, weird, nutty game. The sort of game that you maybe play one in every 100 games, something like that rare and that insane. We're going to think about how we end up coping with that sort of game. Because even though it might feel so crazy, like it'll never happen again, you play enough of those to where that you start to develop just as much of a feel for them as you would your standard Terran versus Zerg build or something like that. After that, we're going to be doing the cast of the Root Gaming Tournament directly after this. So after this daily, don't turn it off, because we'll be watching Druby against Dimaga and Pain User versus White Ra. And tomorrow is Torrent versus Sake and Machine versus Sen. So we'll be doing those right after this daily. So definitely hang in there for that. Or if you're an archive viewer, definitely search for that. In other exciting news, oh, I remember now. It is, I have leaked Blizzard in-house tournament games, so those will be casted and uploaded so that you can watch them over winter break when I am not doing any casting at all. Yes. The games are rumored to be epic. So I will go ahead and celebrate that with a little bit of a burp. I had macaroni and cheese before the daily. Excuse me. Nothing luxury, just that good old Kraft macaroni and cheese. The cheesiest, that's like 35 cents a box. Perfection. So, let's go ahead and go directly into the game. And we'll make this daily perhaps a little bit more brief than your usual daily. Just because we're starting late today, because my brain is functioning very molasses-like. So this is a Protoss player whose name is something, but that's not really important because I'm not even going to make an attempt at trying to read that. In the top left, we have Fairy MVP, the most valuable Fairy. In the top left, as the Blue Zerg. So let's see what ends up transpiring in these early stages of the game. First, we're just going to admire the normalcy of everything, right? We're just going to see how they do everything pretty typically. So, this is how your usual PvT would end up happening on Jungle Basin. First, you would misclick a probe when it would go in the wrong direction, and then you would end up arriving at the Fairy's base. You would see the Fairy is doing just usual things, making the drones. Oh, we don't see a pool done. In particular, we see no larva saved. That's kind of easy. If you get there and you see some drones and one egg and no larva, you know he's at 14 food, right? Easy, easy, easy. Alright, has he expanded yet? No, he actually doesn't quite have the money yet to do that. So we're going to poke around here. Okay, extract your spawning pool. We're going to come back here and make sure we block this. Oh, cool. There's still no expansion going down. So we keep continuing to get reads. In the meantime, Protoss is just saving up for a Nexus on 18, a super economic Nexus. Saving that for quite a whilst. We do see the speed for Zerglings coming up. I've just done nothing but describing right now, so let's just do a little bit of analysis. We do like getting the Zergling speed marginally early. In this matchup, we can pick off scouting probes, or in other words, we can pick off probes that would run around to plant pylons where they would warp in. All that nastiness. It looks like after he went Nexus on 18, he went Gate and Forge on 18, and then built a pylon. Just wanted to get those buildings up as fast as possible. There's a Baneling nest going down. Oh my goodness. In other words, Zerg was thinking to himself, yeah, you got the probe there early enough to block my hatch. I am just going to go for a Baneling bust. And it looks like Protoss is not actually going to be equipped to deal with it very well. The general way best to deal with a Baneling bust is to do something like force field. That's really the best one. Occasionally, if you just somehow have enough stalkers or enough zealots, you can be okay. Because Banelings are not actually that good against Zealots in small numbers. In huge numbers, Banelings just kill Zealots that are nice and clustered. But when it's just like 4, 5, 6 Zealots in a Baneling, or in a handful of Banelings, you can control the Zealots quite well. This is not one of those situations. So, I'm going to pause right here. We're about to hit the 6-minute mark. We're just sort of looking around. We see the Protoss is just finishing the Cybernetics core. Now, let's actually look at just this much of the screen, right? Actually, here, I can get the Banelings off the map. Yay! There we go. Now, as your typical Protoss, right, we have our little plan of how we want to continue in a normal, long-term sense. In Zerg's eyes, Zerg's not really thinking of anything long-term. In fact, he can hardly support just one base worth of Zerglings and Banelings because it does suck up all those minerals, but he's very clearly just going for the win right now. Great, great. What a typical situation to be in. Generally, one of two things happens. One, the Baneling bust breaks in, wins the game, on to the next one. Next victim for Fairy. Or, the Protoss player holds it off with relative ease. Fairy kind of goes, ugh, and either gives up or loses pretty quickly thereafter. You know, it's kind of like, ugh, sort of situation. So, great. And again, Protoss probably has his usual plan to maybe go 4, 5, 6 warp gates, maybe go for a Stargate, do some Void Ray harass, that's becoming quite popular, something like that. These are kind of the mindsets of both of the players. Now, there's a huge concept we're going to focus on for the rest of the game, because the game's about to go freaking insane, which is the difference between what do I do next time and how do I best respond right now. So, let me give an example. When you're rewatching one of your replays, you can say something like, oh man, I didn't get my bunker early enough. Protoss came up and just killed me. Next time, I'll get my bunker a little bit earlier. Right? That's you know, the reason we play so many games of StarCraft is because that's where most of the learning happens, is between games. You say, oh, I'm going to do this next time. An in-game decision would be something like, alright, oh wow, he has 4 warp gates done already? I am going to build 3 or 4 bunkers now in order to respond. Or, the 4-gate came and it killed off my expansion, and I've retreated back to my high ground. What am I going to do now, right? After your expansion, the expansion example is a little bit better. Like, he 4-gates you, you don't have a bunker, he pulls back. In the next time thought process, you say, next time I'll build a bunker. But since you still haven't left the game, you kind of want to be thinking, well, what is it that I'm going to go ahead and do now? The reason I bring this up is that 99.9% of decisions are of the variety, let me do this next time. That's where 99.9% of your learning should be focused on. It should not be focused on, well, what do I do right now? I'm seeing a lot of Hydras. I guess I'm just going to go tanks. You need to have some plan. So you say, next time, I'm going to prepare to get tanks in this way against Hydras, right? That's the sort of thing that you really focus on. The one big exception is with an insane game like this. This game is about to get so insane that saying, oh, well, next time I'm going to do this, feels like it doesn't really apply, right? It feels kind of dumb, to be honest. So we really are going to have to rely on how do we make these in-game decisions that perhaps we've never been faced with before. Most of the time what happens is that adrenaline takes over and you just kind of start clicking and praying furiously. But we're going to try to leave that out of the equation. I'm going to go ahead and pop our production tab open so we can see that Zerg is making many Zerglings. We're going to keep this 6-minute mark time frame in our minds. So it looks like this cannon is kind of walled off by the other cannons. But in the meantime, Protoss is just going, ugh, right? Protoss is about to lose his cyber core. He's just going to go ahead and retreat back here to his expansion. And here he does something very, very smart. He walls himself in there. But really, these Zerglings are just really, really looking scary. Now, we're going to do this for both players. We're going to do the same sort of, this game's so nuts, how do I respond for both players? But we're first going to do it from the Protoss point of view, right? The Protoss point of view. So he does the smart thing, which is I am going to wall myself in first, right? I'm going to do the immediate protection. The immediate protection. Alright? This is probably the most straightforward thing to do. A lot of people will perhaps not make enough, or they'll just build a pylon and they'll try to put some cannons here. You know, this sort of pressure to be able to think calmly and do this is quite good, right? But we just first want to make sure that we don't die. The reason I'm pausing right here is that at this point, the next time analysis we would do is, how do I prevent a whole bunch of Zerglings from walking up in my main and killing my Nexus? Next time I want to prevent that from ever happening. Perhaps I want to scout earlier, spot if he's doing Banelings, something like that. But given the fact that I'm in this situation, what do? There's this really great book called The Amateur's Mind by someone Silman. I know the last name is Silman. But it's on there on my bookshelf, which is why I know what the last name is, at least. And in this book, it's a chess book about mistakes that amateurs make and the sort of the way they think. And one of the things he touches on that's amazing is the idea of imbalances. Not in the way that you want to think about it, which is, oh, this is unfair and I hate it and I'm changing races. Instead, it is, where are my strengths located and where are my weaknesses located? Let's do something really, really simple. Protoss goes for 2 Stargate Phoenixes, right? He gets 2 Stargates and gets double Phoenixes pumping out. He's really great at anti-air. He has the airplane totally covered, but on the ground, he is weak. Great. Great. We've identified his strength as just killing air easily. We've identified his weakness, which is killing ground. So, whenever you're in this situation, you kind of want to be saying to yourself, what are my strengths and weaknesses, and also what are his strengths and weaknesses. And obviously, you want to hit him where he's weak. Now, although that sounds entirely logical, in a time like this, there can be a lot of panic, so I want you to run through the following things. How is his economy doing? How is his economy doing for minerals and gas? If you want to get real specific, but let's just stick at the level of, how is his economy doing? Is it really weak? Well, maybe I can just win if I just kind of hang in there. Something like that. Very simple example of that sort of situation. Terran bunker rushes you with 8 SCVs, and you barely hold it off. You know what? Terran's economy is pretty weak. Terran's economy is pretty damn weak. He has 2 barracks, so he's going to have a lot of Marines, so he's very strong with a defense at his front, but because he went for a bunker rush and lost so many SCVs, his economy is weak, something like that. So with Zerg, we can just emphasize the macro huge follow-up. If our opponent is doing something really tech-oriented, like you're a Protoss, or your opponent's a Protoss who early expanded and went for a bunch of sentries. Anytime someone does something sort of tech-oriented or something like that, they just can't really attack you very much. So we have 2 laid on the table right now. Economy, and can he be aggressive at all? And then you can start saying things like, is he mobile? Is he immobile? That's another very big one. Well, there's one more that I had in my brain, but that's fine. We'll just stick with these 3 for now. Is his economy really weak or terrible, or is it really strong? My brain is so terrible today. I hate my brain. It's Wednesday, and for some reason my brain decided to be in total mental shutdown. Oh yeah, inability to be aggressive because he's teching, right? He's going to be scary later. Right now, he can't do anything to me. And of course, the mobility, immobility kind of relates to that. These sorts of things, something like, does he have any anti-air or that sort of thing? You know, like a Terran who opens up with some sort of Marauder Heli and stuff. If you get Mutalisks really fast, that's a great way to exploit that weakness, because then he has to make a ton of Marines, a ton of turrets, a ton of Thors really quickly, and then suddenly you have freedom to expand, these sorts of things. So, in a situation like this, generally, whenever someone does a huge, aggressive, early attack, they are not good with economy, and they are not good at anti-air, generally, right? So, for instance, if a lot of Roaches come at you, if a lot of Zerglings and Banelings come at you, he is not going to have the best economy. Look at the economy tab, or the unit counting station, 14 drones, 19 probes. Alright? That's your strength right now as Protoss. That's a big strength you have, is that you are ahead in the tech and the economy battle. You're behind on the having units right now. So, how do we end up exploiting that? So it looks like, first of all, he's going to try to not die. This is the usual sort of good, calm decision-making. So he has to make sure he stays alive. So what is his plan? What is his plan? Notice these two geysers getting thrown down. These two geysers getting thrown down. If you think a little too short-sightedly, you can end up really hurting yourself. You can end up saying something like, well, I need to get my gas just to make sure that I can get my sentries out to block the banelings and that sort of stuff. But you always want to be thinking of how to do something back at your opponent, not just how do I stay alive, how do I stay alive. So that was a very good little drone, or a little probe block right there. That was a very nice little exploit. So, we are ending up seeing the double wall off again. He's going to go back to mining. So, in this situation, I think a 4 warp gate would be not so great. Because I'm trying to pit my army against his army. He clearly has the superior focus on the army. He has complete and total vision of what I'm doing. So that doesn't seem very good at all, does it? Right, going for 4 warp gate. I don't want to go for anything like Colossus. I don't want to go for anything, because again, that just takes a little too much time. And again, trying to go for the army against army, just the general ground against ground is a little weak. So we are seeing air come out right now. But sometimes when you see something like this, it's so tempting in your head to go, oh, he's cheesing. Oh, he was screwed. He's just going to go Void Rays and try to get an easy win. But really, consider all the alternative openings that he could do. Was he going to go Dark Templar? He can't Cannon Rush. He can't re-expand anywhere. I mean, really, the only thing he really has going for him is the fact that Zerg's way behind on tech. I mean, look at this. It's 1 hatch with no layer at all. So air is actually a very well thought out, logical decision. So again, in the next time analysis, we actually don't want this to really happen. But in general, anytime someone blasts down your front door and really does a ton of damage early, focus on something that's economy related or focus on something that is tech related. Do not focus on some sort of violent counterplay. So in other words, a 4 gate is a pretty bad idea because it's big ground oriented. Something very something expand oriented is obviously kind of impossible in this situation. So the air ends up being a very good choice of ours. So we end up seeing that Protoss doesn't quite have enough money to make probes and a lot of Void Rays at the same time. He's going to begin doing some tech-related things, getting more Phoenixes, continuing to do a little block, getting the sentry out, very smart per usual. I'm always curious to see how often players are pinging back to that sentry and how often they're watching this, because you really need to be watching it almost always. So, what we're going to actually see right now is that resource-wise, it looks like Zerg is ahead, right? What Zerg did is he expanded very quickly. He's been making a ton of drones. He got the Hydralisk den as fast as he could in the production tab. We see a few drones now. Hydras are getting started. We see the Spore Crawler up right now. Now, I want to re-emphasize the same thing I've been saying about Protoss, but think of it from the Zerg's point of view. I've been saying the same thing over and over again of if a player does some sort of crazy all-in bust, a lot of times they're weak against air as Zerg, because, again, they don't really have a lot of hatches, they don't have a lot of tech to get the Hydralisks or the Spire or something along those lines. They're weak against tech, so you can abuse that as Protoss. Now, I want you to just realize and acknowledge that Fairy MVP is doing like as much anti-air stuff as he can. He's rushing for Spore Crawlers and Hydras, and he has these Queens up. But watch how difficult this ends up being to deal with. Just watch how difficult it ends up being to deal with. There's actually nothing wrong in this spot as Zerg. Well, actually, I'll wait until I do the whole Zerg analysis. But just, I want to think of this only from Protoss' point of view. Look at how well this is going. Phoenix is coming in, a few units trying to poke in. A handful of Void Rays plus a Phoenix or 2 is just fantastic, because you can end up lifting key units. Ends up losing one. But before this battle, it was 40 food for Protoss against 60 food for Zerg. But now we're starting to see that Zerg is rapidly falling behind. There, the Void Rays doing more damage. Not really that many reinforcements coming from Protoss. But again, this is the sort of thing that logically, this is about the only thing that Protoss could have done. About the only thing that could have done. This is a lot of the in-the-moment analysis, okay, all right? So I want to state that as broadly as I can. Anytime someone goes for some sort of crazy early super duper ultra aggression, you want to beat it with economy or you want to beat it with tech. You don't want to fight his greatest strength with your greatest weakness, right? If his strength is on the ground and on the big army stuff, you want to try to abuse tech or expanding. So, again, if like it's a Terran versus Protoss and you're against a Terran player who is trying to go for barracks, Marine Marauder. Just trying to go for barracks, Marine Marauder, and just attack the crap out of you. And you're Protoss and you early expanded. What you should do is you should just sort of sit and macro up and win on the economy. You should not try to counterattack and win really early, because if he is focusing 100% of his resources on having a huge ground army, why would you try to do an attack if you're already ahead on the economy? Again, this whole idea of imbalance. What am I strong at? What am I weak at? So likewise, we see that Void Ray is continuing to blast on in. All this food issues happening. Looks like Zerg tried to do a little bit of busting action. More Void Rays coming out right now. And at this point in time, this game is kind of evening up a little bit. Still, I do think that Zerg is ahead. He is recouping in his situation quite a bit. We see these gateways coming out. This is actually pretty brutal right here when he expands and just gets killed immediately. But we can see that now he's re-expanding to his natural, still focusing on expanding and tech. Are you noticing this? That the Protoss player who was up against a Zerg who was going all ground army, all straight, huge force, attack the front. Protoss is literally doing everything but that. He first went the tech route, and now he's going the expand route. He's going to have to not cancel. Ho, ho, ho. Notice how Protoss is pretty much doing everything else, right? Everything else. Great. And by the way, this is really cool. I actually didn't know this, but there is a different animation in the Stargate for when it is supply blocked and you're trying to build something. See, notice that animation, and then when a pylon finishes, you'll see the Void Ray appear in there. Yeah, you see that glowing Void Ray appear right there? Isn't that neat? Yeah, spending a lot of time in StarCraft. So, as usual, looks like our Protoss player is trying to do his whole little tech thing and his whole little expand thing, and Zerg is actually trying to exploit the one thing that he is good at in this situation, which is trying to go for the huge ground army. He also should be trying to focus a little bit more on keeping his economy alive and not having things die so much. But look at this. Protoss, again, is saying, I am battling your army with tech. It is a tech cutesy response to use force fields to block a ramp. It is a big, muscular ground army thought process to use like stalkers or a whole bunch of zealots or a whole bunch of immortals. This is a very tech-focused kind of thing. And at the same time, we continue to see these Void Rays doing all their little business at this backside, and the expansion's finally up. And this game is looking a little bit more even. More and more even all the time. So, I want to rewind back to that essential 6-minute mark of this game. Let's actually pop back to this point in time, and let's start looking at things from our Zerg buddy's point of view, right? So that was a very insane situation to be in as Protoss, but again, if we just think a little bit about where our opponent is weak and just dump all of our resources into exploiting that, we can end up with a pretty substantial response. So I'll actually just do this a couple more times because I want to try to relate this to as many other matchups as possible. If you're Terran and the Zerg does some sort of big Baneling bust, it's generally quite good to go for something like Banshees afterwards, something sort of tech-focused. What are some other classic examples out there? If your opponent... let's say your opponent goes for a proxy gate strategy and Protoss versus Terran, and you kill off both of the proxy gates. All right, now think a little bit about where your opponent is in his situation. Right, he's obviously probably going to be pretty battered on the just huge army front because you killed off his two gateways. He's not going to have any mobility. You can expand a lot more freely. He probably will end up focusing more on the tech path because he knows his army is going to be weak. You only really have to worry about like some sort of fancy tech opening after a failed proxy gate, or maybe an economy-focused opening if he does a failed proxy gate, something like that. If your opponent goes for warp gate and fails miserably, he's behind on economy and he's behind on tech, so you should either expand and chill, or you should tech up and then expand and chill. You probably shouldn't see a 4 warp gate, defend it, and then go, all right, cool, I'm going to go kill that. If I've been focusing so much on the ground army case. If your opponent goes for Banshees and gets a whole bunch of cloaked Banshees and you finally hold that off, where is he going to be weak? In economy, right? He's going to be weak in economy because he was focusing on the tech path. He's probably going to be weak in terms of a huge ground army, but the Banshees are so good against ground that I kind of lump them into that as well. But again, these aren't so much categories so much as like general... Or they aren't like strict categories so much as they are just like general categories. So if he makes a whole bunch of Banshees, then just sort of defend and focus on your economy, and you're going to be swinging way, way ahead. There's some great games from Demaga on SC2Rep and SC2Replay.com where you'll just see the opponent open up Banshee, and Demaga will only make Queens and Drones. And notice that those are the two most economic-related things out there. And what happens? The Banshees do a decent bit of damage, back off. You look at the food count, Demaga's like 40 food ahead already because he's just focusing on where his opponent can't really exploit him at all. Nifty, nifty, nifty. So I want to focus on the Zerg's point of view right now. We're going to do the same idea about imbalances because this is the huge issue with this part in the game right here. Zerg goes, perfect, I won the game. Well, can't kill those cannons off, but let me kill this off. Oh, I want to kill that cybernetics core. I hate dealing with warp gates. Very good. We have put our opponent behind in tech. We have put him behind in tech. All right, cool. All right, I'm gonna try to kill off. I'm gonna try to kill off this Nexus. All right, good, good. And what I'm a little worried about though is that we're still making a huge ground army, right? We're still making this gigantic freaking ground army. Now, in general, I want you to ignore this game for a moment. Ignore this game entirely and think to yourself, as a general rule, if I'm teching to something high up like Banshees, like Mutalisks, like Void Rays, if I'm teching up to one of those things, what do I always need to worry about? Staying alive. Almost every Terran player that goes for a fast Banshee gets a bunker at his front, right? Cool, cool. So you're always looking for some way to let yourself get to the higher tech levels without dying. If you have broken into his base, that is a very good time to start doing something economically focused. You see a lot of good players do this, where they will bunker rush, and then right after the bunker rush, they will be gearing up to take an expansion command center. Generally following up a whole bunch of early aggression with just more of the same early aggression is a recipe for disaster. Look at the resource differential. We see that Zerg is ahead, but in production, we're going to see Zerg just keep going for the win. This is the #1 mistake that people will make in a spot like this. They just kind of continue to try to win it right now. Most of the time, when you do a Baneling Zergling bust, you win it immediately or lose it immediately. That's one of the two things that happened. But most people don't count for a situation where you get an advantage. You kill off a Nexus, right? And this looks so close to working, right? It's inches from working. I still don't even mind this attack attempt as much because we see that it killed off even more probes, but there's just no real necessity to do this because there is no long-term potential. So again, next time as Zerg, we would really want to not make so many not make so many Zerglings. Next time I do a Baneling bust, I want to be aware of a time when I can probably stop and make drones and get away with it. However, in the moment, Fairy MVP probably thought to himself, yeah, I can win, and then kind of hit a point where he goes, oh, crap, I don't know if I can win. I really don't know if I can win. We want to think about the decisions that he needs to make now. He needs to make a lot of drones. He should definitely be pulling guys off gas. No reason to be getting gas right now. No reason at all. Now, I want to relate this back to the same idea of imbalances. Why is gas probably not the best idea right now? Gas is generally used to tech with, to get higher up the tech tree with. If our opponent is beating us on our tech tree, or in a general sense, if our opponent is beating us in the tech, it's not good to try to just catch up, to try to battle him where you're weak. His strength is tech. Your weakness is tech. Don't try to just make your weakness strong all of a sudden. You should just sort of embrace it. So, in other words, what I think Zerg should do is instead of trying to keep all those guys in gas and try to climb the tech tree, he should abandon climbing the tech tree, focus all on economy, all on drones, a lot on queens, and then just play very defensively and focus on the economic front. This is probably the biggest mistake you'll see people make whenever they do this sort of analysis. The easiest example is Protoss versus Protoss. Players are aware that Stalkers and Zealots and Colossus is probably something pretty good to go for, right? So let's actually make it in some strict numbers. They'll say 3 Warp Gate, 1 Robo Colossus is a good number that I want to be going for. I watched a game not long ago where a Protoss went 1 base, and then he went 3 Warp Gate and 1 Robo Colossus, and the other player early expanded. And then that player went for 3 gates, and then went for 1 Robo Colossus. And you know what happened? The 1 basing player beat the 2 basing player. Now, how can this possibly be the case? Well, what happened was the 1 basing player expanded, or the 1 basing player didn't expand, so he got his 3 warp gates and his robo up faster. He teched faster. Then the opponent said, oh, I better go ahead and get my Colossus as well. So by the time he got his Colossus, because the 2 basing player went for the expansion first, his Colossi were slower. So in other words, it was a 3 Warp Gate army and 3 Colossus versus a 3 Warp Gate army and 1 Colossus. Oh yeah, and an expansion. You don't want to battle on that front. So in other words, the 1 basing player who went 3 gate, 1 robo, he's fine. He focused on teching up and getting an army and not expanding. But you know what the expanding player should do? He should focus on not teching and just getting a huge army. You see a lot of people early expand and then go 4 or 5 gateway. They don't climb up the tech tree. They stay low tech because expanding puts them behind on tech. It's too hard to try to catch up to someone who's already going down that path. Our Protoss opponent clearly cannot expand. Our Protoss opponent clearly cannot get a huge ground army. The only thing our Protoss opponent could do is to try to do some sort of cutesy tech response, like to get a bunch of Stargates, which we see right here. So it makes absolutely no sense to try to catch up to him on that tech path. We should abuse the fact that he has no expansion. We should abuse the fact that he has no potential to make any ground army, and we should only be making tons of queens and drones and pulling everything off gas. So Zerg eventually realizes this. Now, at this point in the game, I actually think it's pretty damn smart to just continue to make drones, continue to get queens, get an Evo chamber for an upgrade, start spreading the creep around. I actually dislike the choice to get a layer so quickly. We're going to start to notice that the money gets a little cramped. So here's the queen that pops out, and our money starts to get a little cramped. Oh, yeah, there's an Evo chamber. And this is a pretty easy period of time for a player to, I guess, get a little bit overly cocky and just think, yeah, I won this game. There's the Roach Warren going down. This, I think, was perhaps one of the biggest mistakes all game long. That was... What are you making the Roach Warren for? I mean, you can get it eventually, but, I mean, look at your vision. You have absolutely nothing here. You have them completely and totally contained with Zerglings and Banelings. Let's not forget that we can still make those units. I mean, you have them in total lockdown. Roaches are generally made for some sort of defense, but $150 that we don't have. Notice the larva buildup. Trying to do a little bit too much. Getting this extractor out. Don't really know why we need that extractor. Excuse me, so early. Getting a little bit too much. So in this situation, it's always good to be kind of aware of what units are good against a general sort of theme. Like, for instance, the Roach. What's a Roach good against? Not that many things, to be honest. They're great against huge ground armies, huge, like, balls. Roaches are not good at, like, breaking very well defended positions because of like force fields and range on tanks and all that stuff. They're not so great at defending a wide variety of things such as Void Rays, such as Banshees, right? They're just not that great against those units. Hydralisks are a much better all-around unit. Mutalisks are a little bit worse all around, I would say, than the Hydralisk, but Mutalisks are still sort of okay. But Hydralisks are a little bit weaker when it comes to the huge, gigantic Protoss armies, right? If your Protoss opponent is going for a huge 6-gate timing push, Hydras can be a little bit hard to defend it. Roaches can be a little easier to defend it. The reason I say all this is because if you have crippled your opponent, Hydralisks are a great thing to go for. They're so good because they really line up well with the idea of staying economically focused, right? We're just going to focus on economy and not dying. Hydralisk costs exactly one larvae for a very, very, very potent unit. I'm not the biggest fan of this upgrade quite yet. Not really the biggest fan of that because this is kind of going down the tech route. If you can find a way to squeeze these in just barely, that's the sign of an amazing strategy and a true genius. But if we're just trying to make ourselves get from middle diamond to top diamond, then yeah, screw this upgrade. We need to just get a lot of Hydralisks out fast so that we don't die. Because look what ends up happening. We didn't make drones early enough. We didn't make drones early enough at all. We didn't start making a lot of Hydralisks. We didn't acknowledge those Hydralisks as a huge unit that we really desperately needed to get oh so bad. There's a couple of units out there that really fall into the category of, oh, I desperately need to get this up. Oh, thank God it's finished. I feel so good. The Sentry is probably the best example, where you're like, oh my God, I need to get the Sentry. The instant I get a Sentry, I'm going to be okay. Oh, all right, I have a Sentry out. Now I can force field Banelings. I can force field away Roaches. Oh, thank God. But there aren't that many units in StarCraft 2 that have that same initial feel to them, and I want to highlight that the Hydralisk, when you have crippled your opponent, and it's going to be 2 base against 1 base, get the damn Hydras out. They're so good. They're so great. They're so amazing. So, in this particular circumstance, we see that Zerg is looking a little bit weak. A teensy bit weak. He ends up losing his Hydralisk Den. He'll end up pulling back for the time being. He might go for some sort of huge bust, some sort of like all-in thing where he just like morphs all his lings and tries to go kill it. That is not really the topic of this sort of situation, right? This sort of situation is, this is a weird game, and how do we approach this from a more objective way so that we can continue to play well even though we've never been in this spot before. So, as usual, Zerg loves getting a couple of huge, powerful units to help defend against the likely set of attacks, and then go right back to making drones. If your Terran opponent is likely to be going Marines and SCVs all in, you want to get a lot of Banelings real fast and then go right back to making drones. If you are against a Protoss player who is likely going to be going only tech-style openings like Robos or Stargates, but basically not that many gateways, you want to be making a lot of Hydralisk and then going right on back to making drones. So we do see that Zerg's trying to do this little clickaroo. I actually am not a big fan of kind of target firing, clicking to kill something, unless it's like a 100% guarantee to kill it off. If it's close, just back off, because those units will always be useful. Zerglings are never worthless. They will always be helpful in the game. So this little move out, I half am okay with. It makes sense because essentially Zerg is saying, I have a huge army and you do not have a huge army, so I'm going to try to take advantage of my huge army by attacking. However, I really prefer taking advantage of a huge army by expanding, right? That's another great thing to do. Teching, expanding, building more units. Those are the 3 broad categories. Mobility I always try to throw in there. But that kind of, again, relates back to having a huge-ass army. If you have a huge army, you're the one who's allowed to move around the map. Your opponent is not really allowed to move around the map. So, we see more Hydralisks coming out, but I'm starting to get concerned because I'm not seeing Zerg really do any damage with his huge army or expand. Like, this expand is a little late. Now, I want to note that almost everything that Zerg has done this game has been correct, but a little bit late. He went ahead and went back and made drones and expanded, but it was a little bit late. He's expanding because he has a huge army and Protoss cannot really afford to move out at any point, but it's a little bit late. And this is a very, very, very common thing for your brain to do wrong in a situation you've never done before. It does. A good player will generally do the correct-ish thing late, because their mindset tends to start becoming one-dimensional. With a regular build always has a sort of theme to it, you know, like first I'll be going Marines, and then I'll be going Marines and tanks and medevacs, and then I'll be going Marines and tanks and Thors and medevacs and Banshees, right? It's kind of like this, then this, then this, and this. Everyone's build order that they've done a million times has a lot of steps and a lot of phases that they're aware of. When you're in a crazy game, you don't have this plan anymore. So again, your tendency is to sort of go, that is my goal now. Zergling, Baneling, that's my goal, and kill him with that. All right, no, it's not working. Well, then Hydralisk. I'm gonna kill him with a Hydralisk because I think I can. And I'm only gonna stop trying to do that the instant it is abundantly clear that I can't win. So I want to just make you aware that your tendency is going to be to not think one step ahead. It's going to be to obsess about your current plan. For the most part, people tend to not tech and not expand. Those are the two big mistakes that people make. The reason that they make those mistakes is because in their brain they're going, holy shit, this game's weird. I hope I don't die. How do I... What's the natural way to not die? It's to make units, right? Or in other words, to not tech and to not expand. So, I mean, we're going to see that Zerg is going to have a little bit of trouble holding this off, as this is a very nice mix by our Protoss superhero. And all of this kind of comes back to the idea of doing it a little bit late. If there were 7 more Hydras there, if 7 more Hydras had been able to be produced and this attack hadn't happened, I mean, this expansion would have been up and finished and could have had defenses. Those 2 little mistakes in the early phases are really coming back to haunt them. Now, the funny thing is that Protoss, despite really having pulled himself back in the game, I mean, look at the food count. I mean, Protoss just killed off this expansion. He's getting some Colossi up. Protoss is really going to start to make an overwhelming set of mistakes real soon here, right? Because again, in the weird games that you never end up playing more than once, people still are blown away that the game is going on. Zerg is probably still blown away. Oh my god, I can't believe that this game is still going. I had this one with Zerglings and Banelings. Protoss probably thinks in his mind, oh my gosh, am I actually going to win this? Holy cow, holy crap. So what I would want to point out is, why is Protoss attacking? Why? Why is he attacking? Protoss has a small army, and Protoss just killed in an expansion. This whole attack makes no sense. Let me actually back up to where the Protoss was making sense. And again, Zerg was doing everything a little late, but Protoss, you know, is getting a really fantastic army mix. Alright, yeah, we're going to start backing up. Alright, so right around this point, yeah, there's the hatch that just popped, right? Everything that Protoss was doing up to this point is great, right? I mean, with the exception of the Zealots kind of getting miscontrolled. And then, holy goodness, we have actually killed that expansion. You know what you should do as Protoss? You should just back way off. You should pull all the way back here. Because again, you are up on economy, because you killed an expansion. Your opponent is up on army, because he just finally held off your attack. Right? He lost his expansion, but now he has enough units to kind of repel those end things. This sort of attack is done. What does this attack accomplish? Tell me, is this definitely going to kill this army? And emphasis on the word definitely. This is actually really, really close. Wow. If I kill this army, do I win the game? Well, probably not, because Zerg's actually still producing more guys. Does this let me kill off some key piece of tech? No. Does it let me kill off some key expansion? No. An attack really should have a purpose. This is just kind of, oh man, I think I'm still surprised that I'm winning, so I'm just going to kind of rally units to the front. How great would it have been if Protoss just pulled back to here, built a pylon, built a cannon, expanded, maybe just built a pylon, expanded. An expansion, or heading towards an expansion, would be a marvelous idea for Protoss right now. But look at how close these battles are. Oh my goodness, let me try to barely warp in Zealots. Notice the queens are participating in this battle and are being useful. If we don't attack, we don't have to deal with the queens. And oh my goodness, wait a minute. It looks like Zerg is actually getting a chance to repel us. And Zerg's kind of going, woo, thank God Protoss continued attacking because he gave me all these free units. By the way, this is some very nice micro. I'll just say that and let it retreat. And now that advantage that Protoss had, it's kind of gone. Protoss really had a good opportunity to expand. Zerg now expanding because that's really all he can do. And again, this is actually a very smart expansion by Zerg. He just repelled a huge attack. His opponent was forced to retreat. Zerg really is feeling like he has the bigger army. So since I have a bigger army, no reason not to expand because his smaller army won't allow him to get an expansion. Everything I'm saying, almost everything I'm saying at this point, is about the expansion. The only thing that I haven't really touched on is the whole tech thing, because no one's really doing anything too crazy tech-wise. That would be something like, oh yeah, Protoss should focus on getting upgrades right now, or something like that. Or Protoss should really focus on getting Templar, or something like that. I'm going to kind of ignore those, just so we can hone down and really focus on this whole expanding notion. So now, this attack has a little bit more focus to it, right? Oh no, he has an expansion up. Let me kill that. Right? See, here's the carrot. Here's the little golden nugget that we're going for. We're trying to kill off that expansion. If this wins the game, that's good. But you still want to have something like, yeah, I kill his expansion, which screws him over economically, which lets me win the game. That is a lot smarter. A lot of thinking about around the whole expanding notion. Anytime you kill an expansion, you can take an expansion, you're just doing beyond the greatest thing in the universe. Looks like Protoss is getting a little over-eager and is target firing the hatchery. Again, unless there is a 100% chance that you will kill it off, I really don't like target firing. Notice that we could have just killed the Hydralisk a little earlier. And still notice, no expand, no attempt at expanding at all coming up from Protoss. None, zero attempt. Zero attempt in the slightest. Yep. None at all. Protoss is still not expanding. Protoss is really low on money and he's not expanding. How tragic the desperation Protoss feels. Oh no, my whole army died. Well, maybe I'll... Well, okay, well let me make some sentries because I still really want to win with this attack. Oh, come on Protoss, just expand. Just back up and expand. This is really making this super nerve-wracking for me to watch. I mean, if I hadn't already seen it, I would have been like freaking out. But, oh... Now, I want to emphasize that Protoss barely won a game that he could have won a little bit more convincingly. And it all just kind of comes back to this whole notion of expanding. You just want to expand a lot more. In the early game, when everyone's really can have some crazy changes in tech, sure you can abuse I'm going to tech because he has not teched and exploit him in that fashion. Especially in those late game situations, friggin' expand. Friggin' do it, dude. It drives me crazy. It drives me crazy. So yeah, that's really important. I want to just throw out more 3-second examples about this whole freaking idea. If let's say I'm a Zerg player who goes Zergling Baneling in the mid game, and my Terran army or my Terran opponent tried to go for some huge push, and I killed everything off with my Zerglings and Banelings. It's a really good idea to now begin expanding again, because I've crushed his whole army. It's a really good idea to drone up. It's a really good time to start getting some upgrades. Now, the upgrade one I want to emphasize. Why is it good to get an upgrade right after you kill someone's whole army? Why is that good? Because a +1 armor upgrade or a +1 attack upgrade takes a long time to finish. Right after you kill a huge force of his, it's going to be a long time before he moves out with his next army. In other words, great, perfect timing, which means I will get my +1 armor upgrades. Next time you move out, I'll have all my upgrades done. Great. What's another one? If I'm Terran, and let's actually do that with Terran. If I'm Terran and I move out and a whole bunch of Zerglings and Banelings kill everything of mine off, What would be the best decision to do? What would be the best decision to do? Well, if it was a pretty close army exchange, if it was a really close, even army exchange, sometimes the best decision is to remass up the same freaking force and just go at it again. If my opponent went Zergling Baneling, he's not high on the tech. He's probably not high on the economy. He's not high on the expanding too much. He was trying to make the big ground army to battle my ground army. And since I'm Terran and I can make SCVs constantly, sometimes it's good just to jam another attack in there. And then if that fails, to jam another attack in there. That's why you see Terrans a lot of times just do straight push, straight push, straight push. Because they're kind of saying, oh, all right, we traded armies. All right, we traded armies, but both of those times I was getting more economically ahead with my SCVs adding on more and more and more, and you, my Zerg buddy, were having to devote all your larvae to those Zerglings. Let's say you're Terran and you move out with a big force and you kill off one of Zerg's expansions, but then you trade armies. What's a good thing to do? It's good to sort of turtle up and then take an expansion yourself, right? So if we're on Zelnaga Caverns and I'm down here and Zerg had his 3 bases up here and I killed off one of them, so now it's 2 base versus 2 base, well, next thing I'm going to do as Terran is go try to take my gold, and I'm probably not even going to move out and take some sort of huge attack, because I'm going to try to win on the economic front, because that's where I'm clearly in the lead. These sorts of things. These are some many examples. Let's take, like, 2 questions. Let's just take some questions. Pig or a Hen says, Dear Day 9, do you think that the biggest mistake the Protoss made this game is to fast expand when the Zerg did not fast expand at the very beginning? I actually don't, for 2 reasons. One, it's really hard to know that Zerg didn't early expand. That's really hard to see. So a lot of times you'll see some Zerglings pop out, kill off your probe, and then Zerg will just immediately expand. Pretty damn typical. So it's kind of dangerous to just be like, yeah, I'm not going to do anything until I know he's not expanding or he is expanding, because generally you'll just see nothing. I think the mistake that the Protoss made was not to be active enough and sort of checking up to see if that Baneling burst was happening. Excuse me, sorry, the macaroni is just very volatile in my system. So I would say, yeah, I mean, he could have set up his wall off a little better. I think that's something that a lot of Protosses neglect. I personally have won so many games where Protoss just has, it's like a pylon cannon gateway wall off. So you just walk up, you kill the gate, or you kill the cannon, then you turn, you kill the pylon, and then you immediately win. I mean, even Terrans, like, lean a little bit more towards like a barracks factory wall off as opposed to a depot wall off, just because they're so easy to get smashed by Banelings. Something like that. So the mistake that I think Protoss made was not having a good setup to block the Baneling bust in the first place. So you see players like TT1 rush for a cybernetics core, so that way they can get just a sentry out really fast. Actually, Tester's really well known for like doing a ton of damage and then going cybernetics core before anything, just so we can get a sentry for force fields. Some great games from the beta between Idra and Tester with just amazing force field stuff. So something like that. I would say something like that. Avenger0331 asks a very interesting question. Now, I want everyone to actually accept that this is a very legitimate and very good question. He says, Day 9, do you think the Protoss players should have made carriers instead of Colossus? It seems easier to tech up to carrier instead of making a Robo Bay and a Colossus den. Now, this is a legit question because it relates back to the idea of I really should focus on tech areas that I have teched through, right? So, you know, what's easier, Colossus or Carrier? Obviously, the Carrier is easier because we just build our fleet beacon and then we're just sort of going Carrier. What really do I think of that? I think that this one kind of relates back to. That's actually so close. I'm just not sure. Because, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have not experienced Carriers versus Hydralisks, and Carriers are really good against Hydralisks, especially if you've been making a lot of Void Rays and Phoenixes before then. That may have been pretty damn kick-ass. That may have been kick-ass indeed. I guess what I would probably say is that, what do I think about that? I think the issue with going for a Carrier I think this whole issue actually relates back to the fact that Protoss really wanted to get the expansion up back in his main. Protoss was just thinking, I need to get my main back. If he went for carriers, it's kind of hard to get your main back. Carriers are super expensive, so you're basically only going to have Phoenixes, Void Rays, and carriers. And that's it. Those are all the things you're going to have. However, if you go for like 4 warp gates, the way that Protoss did, Protoss said, I'm going to go 4 warp gates so that way I can retake my main. And now that I have that, 4 warp gates and this air works just so well with Colossus, it's okay for me to go ahead and get that. I mean, gateway units, Void Rays, Phoenixes, and Colossus are just such a potent combination that I think I would probably lean more towards that being the reason why. But honestly, I think it's really close. I think it's really, really, really close. I think more people should do that. White Raw was experimenting around with that for a while, going like 2 Stargate Void Ray after he expanded, and then going Phoenixes, and then going Carrier. And he was such a kick-ass, badass. Yes. Let's go ahead and take one more question. And remember, don't go anywhere because the Root Gaming Tournament's coming up right now, right after this, So, Take the last question by Ronan Barbie. Dear Mr. Thoughthammer, how can you expand on a map where expansions are less defended by your own attack path, where Zerg can abuse its mobility to keep me from having map control? The way... let me actually expand upon this question, just so people sort of get the idea. What's a map where it's really unbelievably impossible to take a third? Blistering Sands is a fantastic example of this. So let's say we're in the top right position as Protoss. Ronan Barbie is saying something like, after we take our natural expansion, if I try to take my gold in the bottom right, Zerg can either go through the back rocks and hit my main, he can go to my natural, or he can go to the gold, and those 3 attack paths are very far away, so it's kind of hard for me to deal with that. I'll actually state it like this. Anytime you have a really hard to take third base, the whole technique is to go huge 2-base armies. Focus a lot on a powerful 2-base, giant slam dunk fist in the face sort of army. So for instance, something like 7 or 8 warp gates on 2 bases with an upgrade. That is going to make a huge army. Something like 5 warp gate, 2 robo colossus on 2 gate for a huge army. Something like 6 warp gate, 1 robo immortal with upgrades and blink, right? Like something huge like that. The reason you do this is that when you go and when you take this huge force and you go to attack, your expansion is defended by virtue of how huge and scary that attack is. Not where it's coming from or the angles you moved in from. It's the size of it that is so terrifying. If he counterattacks, sure, he kills your third expansion attempt, but he loses the game. If he decides to engage in your main army, he might, maybe, in some way, barely kill off your army, but then you got your third expansion up. Huge 2-base play. Anytime your expansion N is hard to take, you want to do huge power plays off N-1 bases. Yeah, that's right, baby. Mathematicians stating it like it is. We'll be doing a daily tomorrow, and again, the Root Gaming Tournament will immediately be following that. Friday, I'm flying to Phoenix, and then to Michigan, and then to Kansas City, so you can catch me on the weekend doing the EG Masters Cup at djweek.tv, and over break, I will be releasing in-house leaked Blizzard Tournament replays. See ya, bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye.